We're at this time right now where people are just recognizing how broken all these systems are and the way that we engage with each other. And we're seeing all the symptoms of what's wrong showing up. And it's, I always say that when things are bad, people just deal with it. People learn to sustain. But when things are unsustainable, when they're so bad that it can't go on the way it is, that's when change happens. And that's where we're at. And there's something really exciting to me about that because people become a lot more curious.
Welcome to the Entrepreneurs in Recovery podcast. I'm glad you're here for another episode, and I'm hoping you're enjoying this new microphone. This is a new microphone, and I will be exchanging it for a different microphone because once I tried this microphone, I was so blown away by the quality, I decided that I wanted to do the step up from this microphone. So anyways, there's the behind the scenes of a podcaster getting really excited over a microphone. So I hope you're all having a really important time of self-care right now. The world is a little crazy with the election coming, and by the time this released, the election will have happened. So I hope you are taking good care of yourself. I hope you're getting out in nature, getting your shoes and socks off, going out and doing some grounding and earthing, spending some time in nature with the trees, or if you don't have trees around you, maybe find some water and just take a few moments to just breathe. So with that said, I'm really excited to introduce my next guest, David Waldas. David Waldas is, I would say, many things, but one of the things he is a superior coach. And I say that just because I really like his approach to coaching. And he has a system called the Aligned Living System. And in this episode, you're going to actually hear him coach me. I become very vulnerable, like I try to be on most episodes. And he really helped to show me to stop giving myself away, to start to, see that the stuff I'm offering others is really the stuff I most want, like to be seen and heard. So I really hope you enjoy this episode. It is an intimate episode of my own self and also getting to know David in a more intimate way. So I'm hoping you enjoy this. If you do, make sure you go ahead and like and subscribe to the YouTube and on Spotify and iTunes if you enjoyed it. With that said, enjoy the show, everyone. Hey, David, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jesse. Great to be here.
It's really great to have this discussion with you today. I'm excited to introduce you to my audience, and there's so much that I'm looking forward to getting into. And I want to start with how I met you. I often share this with guests and with my audience. We actually met because you listened to a podcast with Deanne Adamson, and then you reached out to me and said that, oh, I know Deanne. I used to coach Deanne. And I was like, wow, what a small world, because that's a big connection to this whole brand and this whole podcast, Entrepreneurs in Recovery, because she's obviously working with people with addiction recovery and many other things, but addiction, recovery, psychedelics, and she's connected to Joe Polish. And that was like one of my archetypes for entrepreneurs in recovery. So it's a big whole little rabbit hole. And so I'm really glad you reached out, and I'm really grateful that you're on the show today.
Yeah, well, thanks, Jesse. It's great to be here. It seems like, synchronicities are always what happens with this. It's funny how hard we work to try to get things to line up and, what is the angle to come in here and to come in there. And, when we relax and things just synchronistically align, and those are the ones that always make the difference, right? When we look back on it, it wasn't all the things we pushed or, tried to achieve. It was, we let go and things lined up and we go, oh, perfect.
I can't wait to get more into that too, about pushing versus being pulled. And I'd really like to start out with letting the audience know, though, your story. You shared a little bit about your story with me. I would really like my audience to get to know your story and how you became this person today that you are.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny when I look back on these different stages of my life. I kind of feel like I've lived several different lives because of just different levels of awareness. And like growing up, I was kind of that weird little kid that the teachers didn't know what to do with, who, just didn't quite fit in. School didn't quite mesh for me. Whenever I had to fit into a system, it just it didn't go well. I always joked, it was like, as a little kid, it's like I had the answers, but I had no idea what the question was. So I could tell them what they wanted to hear, but I didn't even know what they were asking. It was just super ADHD and allergies and dyslexic and, all the things where I was just in this other world. And then when I guess I was 18 or 19, I got diagnosed with ADHD, and they gave me Ritalin back then, Adderall today. And all of a sudden, like, I had access to a linear world that I just didn't know before. Kind of clued me into the way the world worked. And I started becoming much more pragmatic. I went on and got my master's degree, became a teacher for 12 years, as a soccer coach. Then I went into entrepreneurship. But on my 30th birthday, I got invited to a psychic fair. And, it was funny. Like, I hadn't been into that kind of stuff at all. I'd kind of maybe played with tarot cards a little bit or whatever, but I just didn't take it very seriously. I thought it was interesting, but, not something I was really drawn to. And when I walked into this fair, it was this huge room, probably like 50 different psychics all spread out. And there was this one woman, I'm like, that's obviously who I'm supposed to sit with, this woman, Sandy. And I sit down with her and she starts shuffling her tarot cards and lays them out. And she goes, "Oh, I see you're planning this big move, across the country. Not everybody's happy with it, are they? But you need to do what's right for you." I remember thinking, like, what? How does she, like, it just blew my mind that she knew that. And then she went on to say the job you wanted is coming through in the next 2 weeks. And then as she's finishing, she goes, "Oh, sweetie, I like this one. I'm hearing the same gift that I have. It's going to open up for you too, and quick." And so literally the next day, I'm driving over to the realtor's office, been having some problems with her and wanting to terminate our contract. And she'd been ghosting me for like a week. So I was just pissed off. I'm going to take matters into my own hands. I'm just going to show up and take care of it. I was sitting in the turn lane, ready to pull into her office. And this subtle voice came in that was, "Not now." And I totally on a mission ignored it. And then, "Not now," a bit louder. Still ignoring it because I'm just trying to take care of things. And then it was, "Not now," like unmistakable. I was like, oh shit. Pulled back out of the turn lane, went home. About an hour later, I'm sitting on the couch and I'm thinking, what is going on? And I hear this subtle voice that goes, "Now." It was totally new to me. I get up in my car, drive over. As I'm opening the front door to the realtor's office, she walks in the back door of the realtor, hands me the paperwork to end the contract. I sign it and I'm done. I'm like, oh shit, like life's going to be easy from here on out. Like, I have this magic superpower now that I have access to, this gift that Sandy opened up for me. But it was super naive of me to think that because, those of us that are intuitive, like, it's not easy street. It's what's the next level of myself, and that guidance, that intuition just steers us into wherever it is that we need to grow, whatever is kind of the next level of us that we need to gain access to. And so, at that point, my life became all about personal development and spiritual development. And it continued, I taught for a while, but then I started doing like tarot readings and psychic work on the side. And then in 2016, I had a spontaneous experience where I was driving on I-70 through Vail, Colorado. And if you've been through there, that highway kind of curves through the valley. And as I came around the last bend before the pass, saw this huge rainbow in the distance. It was like, it sounds like such a hokey story when I think about it, but and as I come around the corner, I realized it was coming down into the highway and drove right into it and instantly just covered in these refracted rainbows. I remember looking in the back seat of my daughters, Olivia and Ava, and they were just like covered in them. There's a couple driving in the car next to us. They had their hands up in the air, like, what is going on? And like, I don't know how they were driving. I don't even know how I was driving because in that moment, I popped into this state of consciousness where that psychic part of me, that channel that I've known so well, was still there. But at the same time was also, the father, the entrepreneur, the business person, that grounded, stable part of me. And I had access to him all at once. And then my life before was always, am I grounded or am I tapped in? And for them to marry and to integrate was just, it changed really my whole life. And that became aligned living, which is what I do. And I was just shown instantly, it felt like a zip file that just kind of popped into me and opened up of what aligned living is, how to take people there, who to work with, how to support them, how it supports me. And that kind of just set me on a trajectory of doing this work and really kind of my life mission.
And I'm just going to soak all that in. That's really profound. I'm really curious. Like, so you met this psychic at 30, and then it sounds like you had that gift already, but she just reminded you of the gift. Is that how it happened, where it kind of activated once you were just stepping into the belief that you do have this?
Yeah, I think it's all that synchronicity, right? Like, I hadn't thought about going to a psychic fair. I got invited, things just lined up. Like, it was obvious. I have to sit down with Sandy. She just starts delivering this information. All of a sudden it becomes real. Once it's real, I have to deal with it being real. And then all of a sudden my system adjusts and opens up to it. It was really magical. And, it's funny, Sandy's still a good friend of mine, 23 years later, that it became this, this great connection. And, I think for a lot of us, we have all this going on and we have these moments, like we tend to dismiss outliers. We tend to dismiss things that go, oh yeah, that happened. But, it happened once, I don't really know how much value to give it, or it happened twice or three times. But when we have shared experiences, and that's one of the things I love about doing group work too, is like when we have a shared experience, we really have to deal with it because the person next to us is having that experience and the person on the other side of us is having that experience. And we can't just go, oh, it's an outlier. I don't know, maybe, and I can look back on my life and see all these times when I had these experiences that were absolutely psychic. But I just, I remember when I was in college, I was sitting on the couch with this friend of mine and the phone rang. So I got up to go answer it. And she looks at me, she's like, what are you doing? Like we're in the middle of a conversation. I just stood up and walked on. I'm answering the phone and it rang again, as far as I knew. She's like, that was the first time it rang. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I just assumed she didn't hear it, but, and I'm thinking about it from other people's perspective. How weird is that? We're having a conversation in the middle of a sentence. I just get up and walk away. So what are you doing? And I'm like, what is wrong with her? Like, how does she not hear the phone? But it's funny when, we only know our own inner world. And one of the things I've learned so much from working with all these different clients is people's inner worlds are so different. And it's consciousness. It's what do we have access to? And how are we experiencing the world from the place, from the consciousness, from the vibration or the frequency that we experience it from? And when we start to cultivate that, we experience the world in a really different way. And it becomes really obvious to us what's relevant to us and what's not. What is it I want to put my energy into and what don't I? Because it has such a strong feeling to it. And, it's pretty fascinating how just our reality can shift that like mine did, and the subtle voice comes in and goes, not now. I'm like, what the hell was that? I don't know, but I'm taking care of my, my contract. That's what's important to me right now until I couldn't ignore it.
Yeah, you just reminded me of something, which is going to be pretty random maybe, but I had this thought last night because you're talking about synchronicities, which is a part of the show. Even my show's description, I talk about one of the things we're going to talk about in the show is synchronicities. And Carl Jung talked about synchronicities, and if you don't know what a synchronicity is, one of the ways to look at it is a meaningful coincidence. So it doesn't have to be this big esoteric concept. And I think, so last night I'm just thinking of my path right now, which in 2023, I did a training for 5-MeO-DMT, which is a molecule it's harvested from the Bufo alvarius toad, which is a Sonorian desert toad. And I'm like, why did I go this path? Like, what is it? And then all of a sudden last night, I realized when I was a child, I wanted to be a herpetologist. And out of all the things growing up in Lowell and like my background, it's like, why a herpetologist? Well, I was catching frogs and turtles and keeping them as pets and raising some of them. And then I bought an Audubon Society book and I started studying these toads. And all of a sudden now I'm 41 years old and I'm trained in this toad, this very profound, powerful toad that, can create a very powerful mystical experience. And it can also potentially help with, as the studies are showing, anxiety, depression. But the thing is I just think of that synchronicity and it really hit a part of me, not in my logical mind, but in my body, in like my soul, let's call it. I felt this confirmation of why this path, I don't know all the ways it's going to go. So can maybe speak to that a little bit, that how do we pay attention to those subtle signs?
The breadcrumbs, so to speak. Yeah. And I think it's not throwing out those outliers. And, we were talking a little bit before we got on here, even just about like your schedule and your morning routine, right? And that piece of when we get locked in on just doing the next thing in front of us and following trajectories of like, well, I do this, then I do this, then I do this, and you get that thinking that's so linear. Like linear thinking obviously is super important. We can't, accomplish anything on this planet without it. Yet when we can allow for just another degree of openness, another degree of possibility, that's when that sneaks in, right? And that piece, like it's such a hard thing to describe, because to me, like allowing those synchronicities into that magic and claiming your life and taking charge of it and creating what you want, it's like this very fine line of being super clear within yourself, and at the same time, being open to possibilities. And I often think of it like not mistaking trajectory for the end goal. And so when we set a goal, right, it creates a trajectory and we're moving towards it. And quite often we feel this feeling of like, oh, this is what I need to do. And we start walking towards it. And if we're focused all the way at the end goal, we often miss what's happening right now. Because what I've discovered, I think when we all look back at our past are usually like a very zigzaggy thing, particularly if we're self-reflective. We go, oh, this is what I'm going to do. We start towards it, and we start to have experiences, and it awakens something else in us. And then when we have that awakening, we go, oh, shit, I was only walking towards that because I needed to have this experience. And now that I've had this experience, I can walk towards this other thing. And maybe that's where I'm going, but I know I need to walk towards it. And when we can hold that sense of looseness of our goals, that sense of, yeah, I'm clear, this is where I'm headed. I don't know if I'm going to end up there, but I know that path that I'm supposed to be on. And if I start walking it without getting too attached to the outcome, yet really clear that that's where I'm headed, and leave that space for that movement, I think we can talk about synchronicity in so many different ways, but we get people that are it's easy to get so locked in on, I have to do this, versus like, oh, this is the direction I need to walk. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think like when people talk about purpose, people get really fixated on purpose, and they're like, okay, my purpose is to do this. And then all of a sudden that's the purpose. But as you said, as you're going towards your purpose, you end up realizing like, oh my God, this is not my purpose, and you find all these other paths. And that's been so true of my path. I think many people's path. I think we see, athletes and musicians and super successful people. We go, see, they knew their purpose and they did it since they were 5, and now they're that thing. And I don't think that's the case for many people. Like for me, it's definitely not the case. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be a herpetologist. Okay, I'm going to go and be, a mental health counselor. Okay, I'm going to go do this. And then it keeps changing as I go towards it. And I think we can maybe get into judgment or shame about that because we're like, well, see, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I'm doing. But isn't that part of the adventure too?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say those people, when they have that level of clarity of this is what I'm here for, if they can't reinvent themselves when that part of their journey completes, they're done, right? Look at athletes, like NFL players, what do they have, 3 years, maybe, for most of them, it's like 2 to 3 years. And, they work their whole lives for it. And then they get injured. They lose a little bit of speed. Somebody else comes along and takes their place. And what do they do with themselves? And, whether it's, singers that, how often do singers have problems with their voice, and whatever it is that they're working through. And this piece of the curiosity about who we are and what wants to unfold, I always talk about ourselves as like this emerging self. And, that particularly when we do a ton of personal development, we think we know who we are. But really what we're learning is, here's my coping mechanisms. This is, who I've learned to be given the shitstorm that was delivered to me in my life and the great things that were delivered to me in my life. And so, when we do this work and go, oh, in this situations like this is how I am. And this is what I'm interested in. But the truth is, like, that's all driven by our past. It's driven by, and things that we enjoy. And why do we feel aversions to things? Because there's some sort of threat usually. There's some sort of a way we don't feel powerful in it. Why are we drawn to the things? Well, there's something that lights us up in it. There's some reason that it feels good to do it. Maybe it was because we got rewarded for it. Maybe it was because it made somebody else happy. And we build this sense of self and the sense of life on top of that. And we create from that place. And so people, when they create really powerful things, I always think about like business clients that their first time out of the gate with the entrepreneurship, they hit a home run. And then they're kind of fucked, right? Because they're like, well, why can't I get it to work again? You're like, well, most stuff doesn't, right? Like it's this process. And so when I see people that have that level of success, and I've had quite a few clients like that have, been on these big platforms and big stages, and they're like, at a certain point, it runs its course, and they're not quite sure what to do with themselves. And so that reinventing of ourselves, it's absolutely huge. Because we're not reinventing ourselves, we're emerging. We're going, there's actually more of me under here that's been covered up by all these ideas and all these things that I feel an aversion to and all these things I feel a desire to that maybe aren't even about me. Well, most of the time they're not. They're about our childhoods. And they don't bring fulfillment. They just bring accomplishment or avoiding it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. One of the things you made me think of a couple things. Even with my own motivations, the people pleasing and the coping mechanisms I use as a child are in many ways. And I see this in entrepreneurs. They're literally built their business around what happened to them with their dad when they were young, or their mom. And, maybe their dad was was like a bully. And then now today they're this tyrant. Not that they're not a tyrant, but they're so into their goals and getting things and managing people. And they can be very piercing with their words to the people around them because as a child, their dad was like that. And I look at
they're the opposite.
Or the opposite.
They're super passive because I would say it's solving the problem with the opposite problem, right?
Yes.
Like my dad was super aggressive and super tyrant, so I'm going to be super easygoing, and I'm not going to be like him, but we're still getting controlled. We're still like, oh, okay, I'm not going to be that, so I'll be the polarity of it.
I think about how energetically we stay in that, even as we choose the path we go. Because I notice even in me, there's resistance towards certain things I want to go towards because it's not familiar with my nervous system. My nervous system's used to making sure, this person's pleased, and this kind of came from the culture of addiction recovery, which is like always thinking about the other person, giving your gift. But the thing is like, then I'm like, wait, if I'm doing that, then what makes me happy and joyful besides serving other people all the time? And I really fell into that. And it's because, as a coping mechanism as a child, I had to do that to receive love too, in many ways. So
absolutely.
I think,
in order to be okay, I think is a really important aspect of that. Like if I give, then everything's okay. The love comes back to me and I can stabilize my life. I can stabilize my inner world. But that being okay sucks. It's like, because there's always this trade-off. And at what point do we go, well, how do I want to thrive and get above that threshold of okay, which is this quid pro quo. I give you this, you give me that. And we don't even know what's happening. It's very natural. It's happening in this supercomputer that is us. And it's just these exchanges. We have no idea we're exchanging until we go a little deeper inside of ourselves and go, that doesn't feel good. I'm kind of sick of helping everybody. I want to help specific people. I want to help, the people that are really ready to change. I don't want to just keep giving my energy away to everybody, that's not in that place yet.
Yeah. And can you speak to that a little bit? Understanding your own energetic makeup, right? That's something... that's some of the work you do. How does one do that? How do you understand your energy, your energetic makeup?
Yeah, it starts with curiosity always, and feeling safe enough inside ourselves to explore the idea that we're full of shit. And I don't mean that in a way of like stop being full of shit. It means like, well, of course we all are, because we're just products of our environment. And so are we the environment we grew up in, or is there something underneath all that that's us that just is dying to get out, that's where our fulfillment is. And so, to me, when I look at that, I have this theory that I work with a lot, and I would say, we all have turds in our creek, right? And those are the things that happen to us as a kid. Sometimes they're positive turds, but they still are like, they're contaminated. We're downstream from them. No matter what we do to get clear, no matter what we do to change, like we're just in shit creek, and it's our own shit that we, learn to live in. And if we call it home, and we go, oh yeah, this really familiar, like I feel like I'm in my groove, but our groove is contaminated with our past. And so a lot of the work I do with people is help them through working with their consciousness. And to me, it's funny. It feels so pragmatic. It feels so mechanical in nature because I can see it so easily. It's kind of how my gifts work, where I can just see the consciousness people are operating from, where their thresholds are that hold them stuck in something, and what they can do to pop through to be above it. And so, when I first started working with people, I teach them these techniques, from the aligned living system, to pop into a state of consciousness where they actually move their awareness, their sense of self, upstream from the turds. from those experiences we had. And all of a sudden we're like, God, I just couldn't get clear about what I wanted downstream from it because I was always contaminated. Like you can't wash it off you. But when you bring your awareness above it, you look at it and go, oh, I remember when that happened when I was 7. Yeah, that's where that was decided. And we're looking at ourselves more objectively, even through curiosity. And we start to go, God, no wonder I keep doing that. I don't like doing that. Like, in fact, I kind of fucking hate doing that. I just thought I did because it made me safe. I thought I did because it made people like me. I thought I did because of all the payoffs. Kind of like how many of us have had a job where we do the job and go, oh my God, I finally got this job. It's awesome. Look at all this money I'm making, or whatever it is, whatever the reward is that we're like, I'm making a difference. And then we get settled into it and go, fuck this, right? We go, like, what am I doing here? Like, I'm so drained, or I've given away all myself. I got nothing left. But we're just trying to solve these childhood dilemmas. And we can't see it until we get worn out by it. But when we bring our consciousness and our awareness above that threshold, we go, there's that trap. There's that trap. And now my multiple choice bank about what I feel like I want, it's not coming from inside the what's wrong or how am I going to be okay. It's coming from a place of what feels exciting to me, what feels uplifting, what does my soul want to express itself through.
Yeah.
And we choose differently.
You literally, you brought up a huge part of my story where I worked at Verizon for 14 years and I was one of the top sales reps. And so I ended up winning this award that put me with a job I could choose almost. And I landed my dream job. And I can tell you, David, I would wake up in the morning, we would do a morning huddle call, and then I would go about to my job. And by noontime, I was so depressed, I would have to lay down on my couch. I would literally have to go home at times and lay on my couch just so I could feel good. And this was my dream job. I worked 14 years to get this position. Wow. And I would have to come home and just lay down because it was so exhausting energetically, because I thought I was going to be happy with making that amount of money and doing that kind of work. And I wasn't at all. And that was that real true moment where I had to really start paying attention to not my goals per se. I needed to start paying attention to my inner world and see what I really needed to do. And that led to jumping ship from that job, 9 to 5, to Entrepreneurs in Recovery. Hence, even today doing this podcast with you, I had to listen. Even if the choice to do that was going to be complete failure, I would rather do that than make the multiple 6 figures and work in this position to feel so drained and exhausted. And it wasn't even that I was working super hard. It was just the work itself was not what I expected. And the feelings. You can't do something like, you can't do that, right? You can't trick yourself enough to stay there for eternity. At a certain point, it cracks. That's right.
It's so funny, Jesse. I worked for US West, which quickly became Quest after I started working there as a salesperson. I was one of the top salespeople too. So I was, winning all these things. And, I taught for school for 2 years before that. I remember the first year of working in sales, I made more in prizes than I made in salary the year before, right? Like trips and, like gifts and stuff. I'm like, and I was like, this is fantastic. But, luckily for me, the Quest took over US West and they started like crushing all the incentive programs. And I was, so popped me out quick because it didn't have that same reward. But yeah, I can see how you get stuck, right?
So I'm curious. I know you work with a lot of let's call it empaths. People hear this, and I really truly believe even these really tough figures, these masculine figures that are like, I'm not an empath, and I think some of them are. So
absolutely,
So when it comes to empaths, and I know people listening to this show, there's many that identify as an empath. So what is that reality like? If maybe you can explain what an empath is, and then how does other people's energy impact us empaths that are trying to, build consulting businesses or businesses and trying to put their work out into the world?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, to me, the definition of empath, I feel, is incorrect. People say that's the ability to feel others deeply. Right? We have the experience when we sit down with somebody, we know how they're feeling because we feel it in our body. And to me, what that is, like, it's just so clear. Again, all this stuff feels so mechanical to me. It doesn't feel like out there and like energetic, because energy is so real to me. It feels almost like a mechanical arm that's moving things back and forth, because it's just that literal for me. And so, we have these emotional bodies that are like, I would say they're like cameras and microphones, and we put them on outside of us, and we read the world and everything that we experience with it. And so when we sit down with somebody, we're reading somebody else's emotional signature and the way they're showing up. But the cameras and microphones are out there, the speakers, and the screens are in here. And so we're always playing everybody else's emotional realities into our inner world. And it affects us massively. And, my theory on this is that when we were born, we used the tools we had to make sense of the world. And so any of those 5 sensory babies, the ones that just can taste, touch, smell, see, that they did the same thing. They're putting everything in their mouth, they're touching everything, they're trying to figure out who they are, who the world is, and they use what's available to them to figure that out. But those of us that have this extrasensory, this sixth sensory ability to feel emotions, to feel other people like that, we just turn that ability on outside, and we engage with the world in that way, where the feedback loop starts outside of us. So everybody we interact with, we feel them, it comes into us, and we're constantly responding to the way people show up for us. And, the work I discovered through that kind of spontaneous experience in 2016, where I popped into that state of consciousness, where those cameras and microphones weren't outside anymore, they were on me. And now all of a sudden my feedback loop originated from inside me, and I was feeling so deeply my sense of self and engaging with the world from that place and reversing that feedback loop, where instead of walking to a room and feeling the room coming at me, I would walk to a room and feel me enter the room and affect the room, and then the response of that. And so it reversed the whole thing. And what I realized is that an empath is not somebody who can feel others deeply. An empath is somebody who has this extrasensory ability to feel deeply, to know, to experience it. We just turned that gift on externally and then walked through our world because it made sense as a kid. And it never occurred to us that we can change that we can re-engage our energy field in a way that works for us now, instead of a way that we're constantly, 90% external and 10% internal. And we're always trying to keep ourselves above the energy or above water, trying to make sense of who we are in it and trying to respond to all the massive stimulus coming at us all the time and all the requests. As empaths, we impulsively respond to other people's emotional needs, and we're so quick to drop our own, when we haven't created a coping mechanism. And like you said, these big burly guys that are just like, oh, I'm not an empath, I don't relate to that at all. Like, why do they have so much armor up? Because they're empaths, and they're like, I can't get hijacked anymore by this world. I need to know how to just claim it and bring my power. And so they create these incredible coping mechanisms to go, no, like I need to have this like hard wall against the world because it's dangerous out there and it's going to hijack me. And so I got to claim it.
I'm curious about how this relates to, and hopefully by now with 33 episodes out of my podcast, people understand what I mean by addiction. Addiction's still so triggering to people. So please, listeners, listen to my earlier podcast about my definition of addiction. And I think addiction is the norm, and you could call it a bad habit. Some people call it that. But let's just say, like, how does energy affect, like, energy moving through your body and addiction and our habits that we do that no longer serve us? And I'm curious because I think there's a lot of people in general, but especially entrepreneurs that have patterns, addictions, bad habits that are a result of energy in the body. So how would we, how does the energy in the body impact these negative patterns and addictions, and what can we do to remove them?
Yeah. And I would say too, that it's even about ways of coping with all the energy just running from the outside world into us, right? When we haven't figured out that we can actually rearrange that setup, and our emotional body, our empathic ability doesn't need to be set on everybody else, but we can set it on ourselves instead and still keep maybe 10% of it out there and 90% internally. Like, we still have an awareness of people, but it's not stronger than our own awareness of self. So we don't get hijacked. We just go, oh, this is what this person wants from me. Do I want to give that to them? But when 90% of it's coming at us, we go, you know what, this is what this person wants from me. So like, I forgot what I was even doing for myself right now. Here I am over there, in their world, making it okay. And, I know I'm kind of, let me just share this real quick and then we'll get back to the question. But to me, when we walk through the world and everybody else's emotions are stronger than our own, the way that they hit us, the only way that we can feel okay is by managing everybody else. And so what we do is we smile a lot, or maybe we do the opposite. We like scowl at people so they stay away from us. But I was laughing, people said to me, like, God, you must be the happiest guy in the world. I've never seen you not smiling. And I was like, oh, maybe I'm a happy guy. But as I started to do this work, I realized I'm like, that's not what it was about at all. I was just smiling to put other people in a good mood so they felt better to be around. And I had no idea I was doing it. It was just like, oh, hey, how's it going? They're like, oh, look, their energy lifted up. God, now I'm okay. Now I can actually be here. And that coming at us all the time, where I was joking, it's like bailing the ocean with a 5-gallon bucket. Like, oh, I got this person to feel good. Shit, here comes this asshole. Now they don't feel good. Now I got to start all over again, or I got to get out of here. And so when we're in that experience all the time, we're looking for reprieve quite often because we don't know how to manage it. And so to me, like, I loved smoking weed when I was younger because it shut all that down. I was like, oh, if I have a few drinks, like, that's gone. And now I'm just in a little dense bubble inside myself, and I don't have to deal with everybody else's stuff. I can just act however I want. I can engage however I want. I don't have to answer to everybody else's demands. And I had no idea that's what I was doing. It just felt better. I was like, I love that feeling. But what the truth was, I was trying to create reprieve from all that energetic stimulus, all the demands of the world coming at me. And I didn't have the energetic tools to do it. So like most people, I'd like, oh, can't wait to have a beer. Oh, good. Now I'm much denser. Now the world isn't hitting me in the same way. I don't feel everybody in the same way. And, it's just such an obvious, easy choice that's handed to us at a very young age. And goes, like, world overwhelming? Here you go. Let's shut down some of that stimulus rather than let's teach you how to engage with it and use it for your own clarity, for your own fulfillment. And, we get hijacked. Absolutely.
I was about to ask a question. Another one came in. What impact does someone's belief system have on this? So like if someone is religious or has a religion or very, whether it's a New Age spirituality or Christianity or Judaism, whatever it is, what kind of impact does that have on your energetic system in making these choices?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I would say that so much of religion has a strong fear and guilt element to it, right? You're doing something wrong. You're disappointing. You're not, like Christ died for our sins, whatever that is. Or like, right, there's something fundamentally wrong with you versus the idea of, like all this stuff, all these demands outside of me aren't what I'm here for. God doesn't want me to be here to just get stuck in the system and just bounce around inside of it. Like God gave me gifts and I get to bring them. And so that thinking, that piece that says, how do I be a good Christian, or how do I be a good Jew, or how do I be a good, whatever, like that principle, like once we're stuck out like 10 layers from ourselves in that thinking and in that intention, rather than just going at my truest self, like I'm innately good. I'm innately, this creation, this expression of God. And when we can start to move through those layers and realize, like, how do I be the best Christian I could be? Or how do I be the best Jew I could be? Or how do I be the best Muslim I can be? Well, by being the essence of me, because God created me and that's where it comes from. And it fits right into the dogma. But if we place the dogma on top of it, the idea of I'm supposed to be this way and we're trying to be that way, we're fighting against all these desires we have to not be that way. Just like the controlling dad, that we're just like, I either need to drink the Kool-Aid and be controlling like him, or I need to be the opposite and just not control anything. But finding balance in that is so hard. And I've seen it so much, where it just kind of haunts people because they're in the intellectual commitment to it rather than the embodiment of, and they're always fighting against their own desires.
I have a curious question about going back to the channeling. So I think when people hear this, especially if they're religious, like it's going to maybe trigger, but sure. I don't care because I love all those people, but I also want to learn more from my guests and I want to learn about this idea of channeling. So, there's books out there, there's a book called Opening to Channel, and there's all these different, even in the medicine space, there's this thing about opening up your energetic body to receive sometimes light and dark and whatever's coming in. And, but let's just say in a normal state when you're, we're just our conversation here and opening up to receive, and maybe a Christian would call this receiving the Holy Spirit, or, whatever terminology. How does one do that? Or is that something that gets opened up with practice, to be able to open to channel, whatever we want to call it, divine or soul or whatever is coming through? How does one do that?
Yeah, it's way simpler than people think. Like, why aren't we channeling? Because we're distracted by everything else. And when we can quiet ourselves and relax into the space, there's a center channel of energy that runs through us that goes up to source or to God or to, the higher energies, however you want to look at it, there's basically a light up there that we're connected with. And it also goes right through us and down into the earth, what I call the sacred earth, like this activation deep inside the earth that I think of as a divine reflection. It's the same energy that's coming from above. And so when we drop into that channel, I always joke that my business is called Aligned Living. We've all had aligned moments. We've all had these moments of clarity, but aligned living, it's about how do we stabilize there? How do we live from that place so that in our day-to-day moments, our consciousness is aware of ourselves, a way that's much deeper than being aware of the demands that everybody else wants. And to me, like, what could be more devoted to God? What could be more devoted than to be able to go, gosh, there's this place inside of me that I can access where I have this divine spark of self, that goes right to source, that goes right to God, that goes right to, fill in the blank, however you want to describe it. And that place, like, one of the first things I do with clients is teach them how to take those cameras and microphones, or security cameras, I started calling it, outside, because we're always trying to make ourselves safe, and turn them off and like reset ourselves and then turn them on inside. And the moment we do that, we have a sense of self that usually needs some cleaning up, because we go, God, there's all these ways I was coping. But once we start to clear those out, that channel, like, the next thing is our intuition just jumps. And we're like, gosh, like, I just know what's right for me. And I know very clearly what's not right for me. There's even if it just starts out as an energetic sense of like, I'm just so clear I'm not supposed to do that anymore. I'm really clear I'm supposed to do this. That's part of it. But I also see clients all the time open up. It's so funny. So many times the clients go, I can't channel. Like, I don't get messages. I don't, like, it's so fascinating how that happens for you. And they'll still be denying it, but then they'll be telling me about all these messages that they got. It's like, it's just too weird, I think, for us sometimes to accept that we are channels and that we do have this direct link. And, when I work with folks that are very religious, like, I think about, like, well, don't you want deeper connection with God? Like, what if we push back all the things that are distracting us and create that space? And it's what happens. It's just how it works.
I was looking at your logo, and you have the toroidal field, a torus coming through, and the center is the human, right? So even in science, this is the thing is about this whole thing about, oh my God, voodoo, esoteric channel, you can't do that. That's the devil. It's not either. Like, if you even start to look at the science that's emerging, the new science, and the science of the heart and the heart-brain coherence and the energetic field, the toroidal field that is created through when you're in this state of appreciation or gratitude that happens, that we can see now through the work of heart math. And so it's going beyond, it's bridging the gap of just spirituality. It's becoming understood through science. And I think that's really fascinating. And I'm really curious, do you know of any studies that they're doing about channeling or opening to this way of connecting to God, source, spirit, higher self? Is there any studies you're aware of that, or any types of research?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much of it, and I think they're careful in their language. People that are approaching it from that perspective usually talk about it more, like Dr. Joe Dispenza, or, like I said, the Heart Math Institute. It's fantastic stuff. And, then you have conversations with these folks, and they're very spiritual. They're very, like, it would fit into a religious perspective. They just don't frame it that way. And so, I think that, and something I've talked about or thought about a lot within myself, like, how much do I bring science to it? Like, when I wrote my book in 2019, my publishing agent said, like, you're just not woo-woo enough to write a spiritual book. I want to write a book for business people on basically energetics. And so I did, and it was really fun to research, like, Dr. Joe and Heart Math, like the same places we're talking about, and use their research to plug in and go, here's why this works. and to kind of reverse engineer it and go, well, I've been doing this. So what's the science behind it?
Yeah.
And, as we look at it through that lens, like, well, of course it works. Like, and it's funny to me. I'm like, oh, that's so crazy. This lines up. And I thought, like, well, why the hell wouldn't it? Like,
right.
It'd be pretty messed up if I dedicated my life to doing this stuff and it didn't line up with science, if it didn't line up with with something empirical that we can prove, so it's like, that's great. It all meshes as it should, because when stuff's true, it meshes.
Exactly. It's going back to the synchronicities, right? So I have this experience of life. I'm going through and meeting all these people, and people are telling me about these books, and I'm like, wow, that has no coincidence, but it does. There's so many coincidences. And then like you, I find heart math, and then I start to do the research of their science, of the peer-reviewed science that they have. And then I put that into my book as well, just so I can plant seeds to say, hey, listen, like, you don't have to believe in this, but it's becoming researched heavily. And I think that, I don't know, it's really fascinating to see where this is all going. And I think that as we stay open to it, we can start to see, like, it can really tear down a lot of the structures that we've built up of protecting ourselves from, feeling joyful feelings, from, inspiration. Let's call it inspiration, right? Like, a lot of the stuff we're calling channeling is like inspiration, it's coming through.
We could add the word divine to it.
Divine.
Or we could just say it's inspiration, right? It doesn't matter. The truth is, we're doing something where inspiration and an expression wants to come out of us. That is us.
I am curious about so you have this Aligned Living Foundation, which to me, it's a nonprofit, right? So a nonprofit for empathic and highly sensitive teens and young adults. Like, oh my God. Like, I wish when I was a teenager that someone could have came to me and said, hey, Jesse, you are highly empathic. That's why people call you shy and they call you this, but it's actually just you're receiving so much information from people that you don't know what to do with it. And you have this foundation. I want to hear about this foundation, because I feel like there's teenagers that, my God, could really benefit, who are struggling, who have opened up this empathic, which I believe many teenagers can be empathic, of course. Yeah,
and even more so than ever. Like, we think kids are more shut down, more distracted, more opted out, but it's because of their sensitivities, And like I said, I was a school teacher for 12 years and a soccer coach, and so I've worked with young adults a lot. And it was really interesting when I was thinking about my work, and I have my private practice, where I do groups and one-to-ones, but I wanted to create something to reach people that wouldn't reach, whether it was, for whatever reason, it was out of reach for. And, I started, first thing, I'd work with adults, and I'm like, it just, like, it wasn't meshing for me. And then I started thinking about, like, who really needs this, that isn't getting access to it? And, I started thinking about my childhood, same thing, where I was just so removed, so shut down. When I was, how old would I have been? I guess I was junior in college. Like, a lot of stuff had happened in my world where I realized I couldn't trust people, where I realized that, the world's just not what it seems. Like, the inner experience I have and how I want to show up, a lot of people aren't having that same experience. They're not going to have that kindness. They're not going to have that compassion. They're going to be a lot more of self-protective. And when we get self-protective, we start thinking from a perspective of how do I want it? We get selfish, we get narcissistic, and we live in this world where those of us that are sensitive, get our ass kicked by it, and it gets run by the narcissist. And so during that stage, I remember I was in ed design class, and I'd been having these anxiety attacks. I just didn't understand what was happening. Like, I didn't know what it meant. I just knew that this energy would come in. And I didn't call it energy. I would just be like, this feeling would come in. I'd get terrified. Like, I couldn't think. I'd shut down. The room would start to spin. And I would just kind of become incapacitated and totally feel like I was about to die. And then, 3 minutes, 20 minutes later, whatever it was, it would just pass, and I'd go back to living my life. And I didn't know when the next one was coming. And so I remember sitting in ad design class, and I could feel the intensity of the class, and we were sharing these projects. Everybody was nervous and uncomfortable. And I was just absorbing more and more of it, and the room started to spin. I'm like, oh shit. Like, here comes another one. Here I am in class, and just kind of dropped into this fog of, like, just kind of gripping on, kind of holding on to reality, trying not to die or whatever it felt like was going to happen. And then I could hear the teacher saying my name. I'm like, oh shit, he's talking to me. And he's like, was asking me about my project. And I was like, it was about this subway map for, New York City from the perspective of the subway. And I'm like trying to talk about it, but the word, like, I had no idea what I was even saying. The words were just like, it's a map. And he keeps asking me follow-up questions, and like, just, complete gibberish is coming out of me. And I remember the girl sitting next to me looking at me, and she's like, could tell like something was very wrong for me, but the professor just didn't get it. So he kept asking me question after question. And he finally just gave up on me and moved on. But, after I created that foundation, I remember thinking to myself that day, and so this is another one of the synchronicities, like, I totally forgotten about this, but I said, if I ever figure out how to deal with this shit, like, I'm going to teach it to other kids that just don't have the resources, that don't have that. And then I packed it away, and then 30 something years later, as I was creating it, I was like, oh shit, I made this promise to myself 30 something years ago, that now that I have the tools to deal with that and to help other people deal with it, I fulfilled on it and had no idea I was doing it. Like, it was totally a lost memory. And so it was another really cool synchronistic moment of like, oh, this was a commitment I made, and here I am doing it.
Yeah, I want to know more about this. I feel really called, especially in this day and age, post-COVID, and the stuff that teens have to deal with right now. Yeah. It's incredible. I mean, the screen addiction and just all of the stuff in the media, and just, oh my God, there's so much. So let's talk to the teens right now. What advice would you give if someone's listening to this and they're a parent and they have teenagers and they have a child, which they know is an empath, a highly sensitive individual? What advice would you give to that parent or to that teenager who's listening to be able to work with this energy that they're feeling, whether it's all coming at them or not? What kind of tools can you offer them so that they can feel a little bit more equipped for this day and age?
Yeah. And so there's actually a free video course on my regular webpage on davidwaldas.com. I think it's a pop-up that comes up right away, and you can go and take the free video course, whether you're an adult or a teenager. And that gives you some of the basics of this. And I think this understanding, like, for me, when I look back on it, like, it was just such a clear feeling. And I see it reflected in so many kids that I've worked with and adults, of I'm supposed to know how to deal with this. I'm supposed to somehow, like, have the tools to figure this out. And the world looks at me and goes, you're lazy, or you're not fulfilling your potential, or you're afraid, you have this anxiety issue that we need to deal with. And those are just all symptoms of, I'm so sensitive to the energy of this world, and the energy of this world, it sucks. Like, it's not a great energy. Like, it asks so much of us. People are all freaked out, and they're just bombarding us with there's something wrong, there's something wrong, there's something wrong. And when it's just inside of us all the time, we're always looking for reprieve. So what do? We shut down, or we, go to our screens, or we opt out of whatever experience it is that we're having, or we keep our groups really small with other people that can also have a shared experience. And that, while that's beautiful, it also is a trap too, because we're just like, oh, me too. Let's avoid all this together. And we kind of create these, trauma bonds, really, in ways to stay small. And then we, like the suicide ideation and suicide rates are just unbelievable. Like, it's like I had to check the source when I brought it up when I was, building out the webpage. So I'm like, there's no way these numbers are real, but they were unbelievable. And this piece of, and I can remember it so clearly for myself. Do I want to be in this world? I can't reconcile the way the world was and the way my inner world was. Like, it was just so far from a match that I was like, fuck, like, what am I going to do? Like, I don't see a future for myself, and I don't see a future for myself here. And the truth is that, when we learn to manage our energy, it's a totally different experience. And then we actually have compassion for the people that we hated. We have compassion for all the things that we judged, because we were just as much a part of it. We were just on the receiving end. And when we disengage, it doesn't mean it doesn't come back up, and doesn't mean we don't have to sort it through, but we have tools to engage with the world in a different way. So for those teens and young adults, the idea that there isn't a future for us, we don't know how we're going to fit in. I would say, like, from our current reality, from our current sense of self and the way that the world is and the way that we engage with it, of course we feel that way. But something's going to happen, and it's going to be inside of ourselves. And we're going to be able to start to select different experiences in the world, not because we're choosing them, but because who we are calls them in. And other experiences are just going to not be as interested in us. And our world starts to sort, like, when we go, well, that sounds like kind of a crazy idea, but then how is it that some people walk through the world and they're always lucky? How is it some people walk through the world and people always go like, oh my God, you look great today? Like, why is it that there's certain people that are always having these positive experiences? And it's, you call it mindset, but it's energetic. There's something in them that's broadcasting this energy that creates and elicits a response from others and experiences that keep synchronicity showing up. And those of us that have been engaged with the, like, oh shit, here comes this. Like, oh God, I don't want to deal with that. Like, we're tapped into a frequency that just creates more and more of that. And so we can go, well, that sounds crazy, but we see evidence of it all the time. How often have you gotten upset with somebody like, oh, things always work out for them? They're always, no wonder they're so successful. They've gotten this and that. And that comes with its own challenges. Believe me, I've coached a lot of those folks as well. Nobody gets off easy. We just get wrapped up in our own story. And so learning to manage our own energy, and even just like, if you take that free video class that's on my website, I think it's like 3 different sessions. It gives you some of the basic tools to start to work with this. Because, like most gifts, if they don't align with what the world wants from us, they don't feel like gifts. And the world doesn't go, you know what? We could use you being a little more self-expressed. Right? They go, sit down, quiet up, you're disrupting things. You're like, yeah, because these systems are suck. These systems are broken. That's why I'm disrupting things. And we become the problem. We become what's wrong instead of the solution, which is really the truth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and we'll link in the show notes your video. And I think, that's such a great example of like feeling like the black sheep, or feeling like you never fit in. Like, that's how I was since I was a kid. It just always felt like that because of, it wasn't just trauma, it was this energy I could feel. I could feel people's energy. That's what led me to be the top salesman at the jobs I was in. I was so unassuming. I had glasses. I looked so unassuming, but I was the best salesperson because I could feel people's energy. I could work with them. I could be very authentic and genuine. And it became a great gift, but it's also felt like a curse in many ways, because it's made me research this esoteric knowledge and all these things because I just felt so different. And I think a lot of people, even sitting in the halls of recovery programs, feel different because they believe they're an alcoholic or addict, when it's actually because they're these energetic beings that can feel so much energy and their gifts, and they're not tapping into the true potential they have. So it's such a fascinating discussion,
Absolutely. And they're born into a world that doesn't match them. And it's funny, when I got the download in 2016 for this work, I was like, this is beautiful. Like, my business is just going to take off. And it didn't really until the last couple of years. Like, I talked about this, and people were just really not that interested. And I'm like, and it's so cool. Like, right. Like I didn't have any choice, but I just had to keep talking about it. And now finally, like, people are starting to get interested because it makes sense. Like, there's a time in our development as humanity where this lines up. And it's so exciting to me because, of that same thing, like, when we're the problem, right? But we're not, we're the solution. And the system's broken. And so we're at this time right now where people are just recognizing how broken all these systems are, and the way that we engage with each other. And we're seeing all the symptoms of what's wrong showing up. And it's, I always say that when things are bad, people just deal with it. People learn to sustain. But when things are unsustainable, when they're so bad that it can't go on the way it is, that's when change happens. And that's where we're at. And there's something really exciting to me about that, because people become a lot more curious. Like, there's the idea that, there's no atheist in a foxhole. If you've ever heard that saying, right? It's like, shit's bad. Like, shit's really, really sideways right now. Yeah. And it gets us really creative. It gets us really curious, because something's got to give, or we can't be here. Yeah. And we're watching all these people, I think there's an energy hitting the planet now too, that's turning people on. And they need to know what to do with it. They're starting to have experiences where they go, who am I going to talk to about this? This sounds crazy. Yet it's just normal. It's part of our biology. It's part of our chemistry and part of who we are. And the more that gets normalized, the more we're going to seek out. Just like, it wasn't that long ago that going to counseling was considered, like a weakness. Now it's just normal. And so, like, we need energetic coaches. We need to be able to understand the way that the world interacts with us and the way we interact with it. It's like the deepest form of language that we have, because it just cuts right to the core of us. And somebody could say something mean to you, and you go, yeah, screw you, right? Like you can push it off. But if somebody like that feeling hits you in your heart of something that you're struggling with, and you feel them directing that towards you, it's way stronger than language or even love or the uplift. Like I think the energy, I'm just so clear. Energy is the deepest form of communication we have, and we pretend it doesn't exist.
I was thinking of the word disgust. When it gets to the point where you just have disgust, that's where change really starts to happen, and great. I'm curious, what are some of the ways that you can harness energy? So like if you want to tap into your energy, what are some of the practices or tools, or is it diet? Yeah. What is it that can really help for you to harness better energy or more energy?
Yeah, it's great. It's funny too. I look back on my path, and I'll often share about my personal experiences because they're also my clients' personal experiences. And I think when we normalize, when we're teaching something, we can normalize ourselves and go, I didn't start with this understanding. I started with complete confusion. I started with being stuck in it and having no clue about what to do. And, as we start to have these experiences and these tools that show up for us, we start to realize that this world that we've been so tightly connected with or trying to avoid, it's not where the answers are. It's not going to help us. Like these systems are broken, and we try to go into them and make it work for us. And the truth is, we need to be able to have tools to drop inside of ourselves. And I think, I love to share this with people because it's just even the edge of what we, do with the aligned living work. And it's basically taking a step back from all the demands. And when we think about our brain, our prefrontal lobe, the front of our brain, is our problem solving. But I call it our problem creating place because it's where we ruminate, it's where we spin things over, it's where we judge ourselves and others. And, sure, we're trying to come up with ideas, but it's so tainted. It's so contaminated with all of our past experiences. And that channel, that sense of ourselves, that sense of our connection to something beyond our third dimensional human self, which to me, I'm just feeling more and more like it's just who we are. Like we're a human self, but we're also more than that. And when we can live in that awareness that says, I'm not just this human, like I need to take care of this human, this body, and it's like what I inhabit, and I need to make this world work for me, and I need to find the way that I want to engage in it and bring all this through me into this world. But when we're up here, we're just churning in the problem, churning in what's wrong. And we don't get inspired churning in the problem. We don't bring fulfillment by churning in the problem. Like we have to let go of it and work upstream from it, work in a place inside of ourselves where maybe we aren't even thinking about what's wrong. Maybe we aren't even in touch with it at all. And the way that we engage actually solves what's wrong. But we're not doing it by looking at the problem. I always use the example of chiropractors, like if you've been to a chiropractor and you're like, oh, my foot's been hurting. And all of a sudden they're working on your back or your hip. You're like, doc, did you not hear me? I said my foot was hurting. And they're like, yeah, well, the problem's in your hip. And you're like, what? But it's the same way with this, where we go, God, I keep having these problems with my coworkers. I keep having, whatever it is, these problems in relationships. I just feel like I'm not appreciated. And then we're struggling and churning into that. But we got to let go of that and come to a place inside of ourselves where that's not what the problem is. The problem is that we're embedded in it rather than in touch with ourselves. And so we can do a quick exercise that, is just about sliding our awareness back a little bit. Letting go of the prefrontal lobe and just seeing what it feels like to let go of things and to get a little bit deeper in touch with ourselves. And when we do that, like I said, it's just a tip of this and it gives us an aligned moment, but it's profound because we go, God, it kind of feels different. Sound like fun? Should we
let's
do a little experiment with it? Yeah. And so I think it's really helpful to start with something that has been annoying for you right now. So thinking about something, and Jesse, it'd be helpful probably for something you could share, something that's been kind of frustrating for you, and maybe you've been ruminating about it a little bit in the more recent, like this week, maybe today even. Is there something that shows up for you that usually it's not too hard for us to go that. Do I have to pick just one?
Well, I'm going to be very vulnerable. So as many of my listeners know, I moved to Costa Rica 2 weeks ago. And part of the move here is to really get aligned with the work that I want to do, which is obviously going to align with the work I get paid to do. But I don't want to worry about that right now. I want to really tune into, because there's that rational part of my brain that says, you have to make money, you have to make money, you have to make money. But But obviously I'm here to listen to a deeper part of me, to see what the service I want to do in the world is. So that's kind of the conflict. It's between money and the service work I want to do. Even if that changes, I'm okay with that. But just being clear now with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. And so what is the discomfort for you then in that? What is it that feels really uncomfortable?
Running out of money and then not having income coming in to, support this choice to have this type of business to serve people in this way.
Yeah. 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 And I would say there's also probably a part in there for you of like, God, I got this thing I have to deliver. Like, I know this has to come out of me.
Yes.
Right. And we probably don't call it discomfort, but there's something pretty uncomfortable about having a mission because, it sets in motion all the shit that we have to deal with in order to bring it into being. And so we don't go like, oh my God, it's going to feel so good to help all these people. We go, oh shit, I got to take care of this now and that. And then I got to figure that out because I got to help people. And now this great feeling of helping people feels like a whole lot of work, right? Or a whole lot of threat. Like, oh God, like it sure was nice when I got a paycheck, right? And so, this commitment affects that. And so you feel that in your body, you feel the tightening that kind of happens for you right now, or it's just like, I'm protecting myself from it. Like, I know it's okay. And so I'm just going to keep using my brain to just not go there and just kind of keep moving forward.
Yeah. It's like creating the products, right? It's like once you're like, okay, this is the service work. This is what I want to do. And then you're like, oh, but I got to learn this technology. I got to do this thing. And then it's like, oh, that's where it gets tight.
Yeah. And you feel how, there's how's your curiosity level right now? When you're thinking about those problems?
I was very high right now.
Okay. Right. How about the kind of the width at which you're thinking, like all the possibilities? Like, does this feel like when you're thinking about it? Because one thing that happens is our vision seems to come, like we get a little bit of tunnel vision, a little bit of narrowing of what's available to us. Like our A, B, C, and D multiple choice bank gets very tight. And so like in this moment, like I feel like you can pop out of it in a second, but in this moment, as you're tightening up on it, like what role does synchronicity play? And you don't need to necessarily answer that because like, I know that if you drop back and you go, oh, well, my thinking synchronicity is everything. That's what's created every opportunity in my life. But in this moment, as I think like, shit, how am I going to do that? And then I got to make sure this, oh my God, and this is how much it costs me per month and this is how long I have. And this is when I need to get things going by. Oh, wait, don't forget about all the people I need to help. Okay, no, it's better for me to focus on the people, not the money, right? Like we do this like inside of our head. And, that sense of, there's a problem here. And we forget and there's also all this support and all this synchronicity. And so let's play with the difference between the prefrontal lobe and sliding into the back. Does that make sense? Does that resonate with you? What I'm talking about, that feeling of the churning and the problems and how is this all going to work thing?
Absolutely.
All right. And so I think there's a couple things to recognize. One is that there's us, right? Who's been conditioned by this outer world to run that sort of thinking, to go, shit, like there's some problems here and I got to figure it out. And, I love that crabs in the bucket analogy, where you put one crab in a bucket, it just crawls out. But you put two in, one tries to crawl out and the other one just they just pull each other back in and they can't get out of the bucket. And so that's what our consciousness is like. Like we're all struggling with it. There's something very wrong. I don't know how I'm going to solve this. But when we go into this quiet place inside of ourselves, we get to go, God, it's just me here. And there's a clarity, there's a connection I have with God or with source or with a higher part of myself that just knows how it's going to happen, that can get in touch with the next right action, that can allow for the synchronicities. And so let's close our eyes for a second. If you're driving, feel free to pull over or mark the spot in the recording so you can come back later. We're going to put our hands out with our palms open. These hands are representing those cameras and microphones, the way that we read the world. And we go, God, this world's so screwed up. I'm going to make it better. But we're streaming that screwed up world into us. And so we're going to just take our hands and just push back that outer world. Just push it away from us. All those ideas about the way things are, all those ideas about the way people want us to show up or the experts that are telling us how to do it and how we need to figure it out. Push all that world back, creating some space. And then we're going to go ahead and just close our hands into fists and bring them under our laps. And we're just going to drop into our physical selves for a minute, forgetting that connection with the world. We're turning off those cameras and microphones and just allowing yourself to be in this bubble of awareness. And so, Jesse, as we drop into this space, what do you notice as we, and again, there's an instinct to go outside of ourselves to find it. So I'm just going to help hold you in that space for a minute. And so from this place, from this experience, what are you noticing about your sense of awareness, sense of self, sense of experience?
I think I noticed once I came back into my body, I felt more confident. After pushing out, it was like literally I was pushing out certain beliefs from people, certain thought systems, just pushing them out. And then when I came into my body, it was just allowing what was coming through me to be shared.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now, what we're going to do now, the hands are still closed in a fist. We're going to put one on our heart, another one on our solar plexus. And we're going to open them up. And we're going to set the intention now that we just slide our awareness to the back of the brain. You may feel, I'll just assist you with that. And just feel that connection with this part of you that's back there. You can see that channel of light. And maybe it's really obvious to you. Maybe it's just an imagination. But you're letting go of the prefrontal lobe, letting go of the front of the brain, and just being in that place where it feels like kind of nothingness. And you may think like, well, it's not much back here. How would I solve any problem from this place? And we're not solving problems. We're actually doing the thing that lights us up, which a side effect of that is we solve problems. And so as we start to slide our awareness to the back of the brain, I'll just help hold you there for a second. I'm just going to anchor you into that channel. There you go. Now you're nice in there. And so I'm going to bring something up, and I want you to look at it like you're watching a movie, like you've never seen it before. And you're just looking at it through this consciousness, through this state of awareness that you're in right now. And so just relax in there. We have a tendency to want to jump to where we know, but we're just going to stay in this place at the back of the brain for a minute and just be in this experiment and this curiosity of what happens when I look at things from here. And so we're going to bring into this space now this idea of figuring out your business, what's next to you, how to reach people. And just I want you to see it like a movie. So there you go. You let go again. Perfect. And so what shows up for you in this movie? How does it appear to you of how you're going to proceed forward, what your next right actions are maybe? It feels the experience of engaging with what you're doing from here rather than in the front of the brain figuring it out. What do you notice? What shows up for you in that movie?
Notice that I want to do the work that just comes to me and without a lot of force and like holding a container for individuals.
Yeah.
For them to
and so let's let that loosen up a little bit too and just let the energy pour into that. There you go. You feel yourself filling up a little bit with that, and maybe subtle, that sense of I just want to create a space where I help people. Can you feel that? Starting to get involved in it too. And quite often when we first go here, more than a sense of next right action, there's often a sense of just the absence of what's wrong. Can you get a sense of that? How when you're here, it just quiets down. And then you're just like, okay, there's going to be a path. There's going to be a path. Maybe I don't see it yet, but I can feel where I'm headed. I can feel what's important to me. And it's not contaminated by all the what's wrongs, all the what ifs. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anything else showing up for you from here, from this place of...
Well, what I got is I was noticing that I hold a space for people for them to feel grounded, and all their stuff and all their, let's say, struggles, trauma, things that are negative in their mind, I hold it in like this trash bin, and then I just flush it for them, or they're doing it for themselves. But I noticed there was like a very powerful flush of the stuff I was holding the container for, so we can move into something else.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, you don't need to put all your bandwidth into all that other stuff. You free it up. Yeah. And I can feel it starting to relax through your lower back, through your heart. The sense of like, oh, from this place where I feel a little bit more relaxed, where I feel a little bit more in touch with my heart, from this place, there's a higher attraction level too. People are going to be drawn to me. There you go. Yeah. You feel that's starting to just get more solid inside you right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. And another really interesting thing too, so let's see if you can stay here, but allow your eyes to slowly open. and so that you're here with me. And so, yeah, staying at the back of the brain there, staying at the back. So you notice the distance between us right now too, how we're, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but, just for the sake of the podcast of, keeping things, at a pace, the sense of the influence that I'm having in your world right now versus the sovereignty that you feel for yourself. Mm-hmm. Do you feel a sense of that? How you're locked in on, like, maybe, and people often experience it like, gosh, I feel like we're standing further away right now. This feels like there's more room in my world. Is any of that showing up for you? It's okay if it's not, but I can feel you pretty locked in there.
Yeah, I think, there's more. I feel like I've entered into my own space even more.
Domain.
And, and I'm coming from a place of more groundedness for myself and would still being curious about you. But
yeah, absolutely. And to me, that's what that overlay is. Like before, when it was 90% external, like we're engaged in people's world, and 10% internal, we flip it and go, now the feedback loop runs the other way. I'm 90% me, but 10% of it now is reading the other person. And now I can really feel how they feel, but it's not stronger than how I feel myself. I'm not lost in it. I'm solid in me, and I'm engaging with the rest of the world. And when we do that as empaths, like everything feels different, because now there's space around us. Now we can engage from this place that is about what we want to bring, and we're not always being hijacked by everybody else's emotional energy, because we always prioritize it because it makes us uncomfortable, because it ends up in here, and we have to do something about it. Like that bailing the ocean with a 5-gallon bucket. Like, how do I make you less uncomfortable so I can be comfortable? And when we don't need a person around us to be comfortable in order for us to be comfortable, it frees up all of this bandwidth, and we get to make a choice. Like, I do want to help that person feel comfortable, but not because I want to make myself feel comfortable, but because I have tools for them. I have things that can help them, and I want that for them. Rather than, and it's funny, we don't think of it as empaths. It's kind of a thing that's a little challenging to digest. And I remember when I first realized this, I'm like, God, all these things, my theory was I was walking through the world helping people. A big part of it was me helping me. A big part of it was me going, God, your energy sucks. Like, how do I make you feel better so I can feel better? Yeah. Not that literal, but there's a certain amount of, like I said, like the smiling, like, God, you're so happy, you're smiling all the time. I'm like, just making your energy better, just trying to make my day better. And when we are, of course we're doing that, because our experience of being is the experience of the energy and the people and the situations around us. And until we can reverse that feedback loop, it controls us. It drives our thinking. It drives our decision making.
That's powerful. Yeah, thank you for that. I really am excited for the listeners to, pull over if they're driving, or be in there wherever they are listening as they're doing their busy work, as they listen to this podcast, to stop and pause, take that 5-10 minute experience we just had, and really tune in. That was really profound. Thank you, David.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful. And it's so simple, right? It's funny. Like I said, this is a tip of, it's just like a sample of what we do. But so many clients I've had come in, like, I do 10-week programs. So they come in maybe a couple weeks in and go, God, I got two main questions for you. One is, it's just so simple. Like, what else can I be doing? Like, how can I move this along? Because, I like this idea, like, sure, I'm like doing these kind of things. But it just feels like I should be doing more. Like, there's got to be another thing I can do to impact this. And then the next question they go is, God, I also got to say, I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed by how fast things are changing for me. How do I slow it down? And they go, I'm like, so you want to work harder and get less? Like, can we talk about this for a second? But it's a common experience, right? Because we get trained to go, I got to put more effort. If I want outcomes, it's got to come from me exerting myself in a way that feels really taxing. And I also don't want my world to shift too much, because that's scary. And so, like, it's when we realize that what's aligning is these micro adjustments, that just our life becomes a deeper and deeper expression of us. And as we do this work, our life starts to become in resonance with us. Shit, how nice is that to walk through this world where my surroundings are in resonance with me, the life I'm creating, the way I express myself, like it's through and through. It doesn't feel like I'm in this internal conflict all the time, or internal external conflict. And that takes an adjustment, right? And I think it's something we all want, and we have to be willing to let it happen, because it's scary when things that are valuable to us start to move. We think they're going to fall apart, but the truth is usually they move like 1 or 2% because that's all they needed to move to become in resonance, in alignment with us. But, it's funny. And we think, shit, I got to do something more to move that. Like, what if you don't? What if you can just drop into this place inside you that allows it? And, like the changes are pretty miraculous because we don't understand it yet, but there's nothing miraculous about it. It's just cause and effect.
It's really profound. And I think that a lot of the things that are profounder can be really simple too. And I think
absolutely.
That's really the big message and takeaway I'm taking away from a lot of this discussion is, it's sort of like the answers are within, and there's a lot of layers that are blocking us from accessing our greatness and our channel of energy to just express ourselves at the highest level. And that's why people get into meditation or they get into plant medicines and all these things is they're, in many ways, they're just trying to access information about themselves. And they're trying to utilize that into some type of reality they want to create, a purpose, some type of pathway through their business or expressing it in their life in some way. And it's really beautiful to always know that it lies within you. You don't have to travel to Peru to do ayahuasca per se.
Right.
Some feel called to do that. I've done all these different things, but that might not be your path. You can access it through some of these energetic practices and the things that you're teaching. So it's really encouraging. Takeaway.
I think that's one thing that is so important to share. I was just getting some hits on this. Is I think that most of us, particularly if we've dealt with stuff like addiction, where we're like, this feeling of, I don't know how I'm going to work through what I need to work through to get where I'm going. So like, I have this vision of myself and what I could be like, but I don't know if I can trust, like, this is some big shit I got to deal with. And, there's 3 stages to aligned living. The first one is that quiet. We push the world back and we go, oh my God, this reprieve, the world's not coming at me. But then a couple of weeks into it, we have this period where I call the calls coming from inside the building. And it's like, we think, oh God, am I leaking? Is there somebody else's shit ending up in my world? And we realize like, oh no, that's me. And I think that's the thing we're all afraid to deal with. But the truth is, when we're tapped in externally and we're trying to deal with our childhood traumas or our dilemmas or, whatever it is around addiction or whatever it is, it feels massive because we're not just tapped into ourselves, our little part of it, we're tapped into the collective wound. And that collective wound is this huge stuck energy. It's like everybody else that's struggling in that has lashed their lifeboats together. It's become their identity. It's become something that maybe they're not ready to heal or they're not interested in healing right now because it's how they keep themselves stuck or they keep themselves safe. And we're trying to heal that inside of ourselves while we're completely tapped and corded energetically to that massive thing that doesn't want to move. And when we find this quiet place inside of ourselves, all of a sudden we go, God, I'm trying to move these things that were never going to move before, but they feel tiny now because we're tapping into just our part of it that was tapped into a collective. And when we remove ourselves from the collective and unlash our lifeboat, come back to it and go like, this little thing, this little, stuck thing inside me is what I couldn't get by before. I don't understand. And it's because we've disconnected from the collective wound. And when we disconnect from the collective wound, it just frees us up. And then as that starts to clear, it just fast tracks stuff. And I've seen people that have tried to work for 30 years on stuff that goes in 30 seconds. And they're like, what the hell just happened? I'm like, you're not connected to the collective wound anymore. Of course it's going to be different. And then once that starts to clear, we start to become more intuitive. Like that step 3 is like that channeling just starts to become part of our normal reality. And so I just wanted to include that in the end because I think that that's a big dilemma for people is like, I want to start down this path, but shit, I know what's in front of me and I'm not sure how I'm going to face it. And the truth is like, when you start down this path, what's in front of you is very different than how you've experienced in the past because you're not dealing with a collective wound. You're dealing with your part. And when you compare the two, they're incomparable. It just feels like this little tiny thing. You're like, what? It was my signature that attached me to that was the problem. And now I can just play with my signature, not this huge, massive thing that I didn't know how to move. And it's a whole different experience of healing.
Wow. This is a great, I feel like we put on a clinic here. You gave a lot of, so much of your time. I'm so grateful for you giving away your gifts and the things you're doing in the world. And really appreciated this episode. This is like, I think the longest episode, which is amazing.
I was just looking at the clock. I'm like, well, we've been going a while.
Yeah. And I had no idea that much time had gone. So that's really a good sign of a great experience for me and the listeners. I really hope you, really just tune in to your heart space and your energy for this. It's like, I don't even know if you need to take notes. It's just such a presence this experience with you, David. And I'm curious, what is the highest vision and highest intentions you're bringing into your reality right now?
Yeah, what I want for the world and humanity is really for us to recognize energy and a way that we can engage with it differently to align us with ourselves. And I feel like that is the solution to everything, is consciousness. Because when we tap into that part of ourselves, we think differently. We become what we're trying to make the world to be. And so getting this work out there, I got it as a download, and it felt at first like this massive responsibility of like, shit, how am I going to get this out there? And now it just feels like an exciting thing that I get this opportunity to teach. And so this vision of, teaching humanity how to engage with the world in a different way. And I'm sure I'm not the only one teaching this. I can't be the only one that got this download, but doing my part to shift the consciousness by allowing ourselves to come home to ourselves. And when we do that, we engage with the world differently, and the world becomes a different place. Yeah,
that's a beautiful message. I love that. Yeah. Can you share with us how people can find you? What's the easiest way to work with you?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram as David Waldas. And then go to my webpage, davidwaldas.com. And the work's Align Living, or the Align Living System. But going to my webpage distributes it to everything. So there's free video courses on there. You can get my book on there. I think there's a free video course on my book. And so there's a lot of free offerings. And of course, I do 10-week programs, one-to-one or with people. And actually, I'll go ahead and throw this out there too. And I'll send this to you so you can put it in the show notes if you'd like. But I do like a intro session, 90-minute session for people that want to work one-to-one with me and kind of see where it wants to go, or just even have an experience. That's normally a discount to $350, but I have a coupon code I can give you for another $50 off. So I'll send that over to you too if people are wanting to do some direct work and really dive into it. And the free stuff's right there too. So I love being able to have it at whatever level is going to be, where people are at, and, are they ready to dive in, or they want to dip their toes in?
Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm really grateful that we got connected, and for this episode, and for our whole little energetic practice we did. That was a real taste of the work that you're doing. And I feel really grounded right now. I might have to go out surfing or something.
Yeah, interesting. Right? Yeah. Our energy is contagious too. When we feel grounded, everybody else feels grounded around us, as opposed to us going to their world and trying to make them grounded. Like, we do it here, and it's contagious. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, David, thank you so much, my friend.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me on. I'm sure this feels like a continued relationship, so really glad we connected. Synchronicities. Sure.
Thanks for watching today's episode. Your support means the world to me. So thank you for liking and subscribing to the YouTube channel and to this podcast. We've got amazing content and amazing interviews coming out soon. So thanks again. Enjoy your day. Sending love and blessings to you all.